They made me get coffee, clean their desks, and called me useless in front of the whole team. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. But in the final meeting, I stood up, looked at the CEO, and said, "Dad, I think we need to talk about this team." My name is Emma Carter, 24 years old, 5'7", slim build, long dark brown hair, usually tied into a low ponytail. I don't look like someone who belongs in boardrooms. That was intentional. People see what they expect to see. And at Ridgeway Group, no one expected the chairman's daughter to be sitting at a corner desk, answering emails and making coffee. I applied under a different last name. No connections, no recommendations, just a clean resume. Or at least, that's what they thought. The first day, no one even looked twice, which was exactly what I wanted. The office itself was impressive. Glass walls, open layout, expensive furniture that tried too hard to look minimal. But you can tell more about a company from how people treat each other than how the place looks. And it didn't take long to see the cracks. Daniel Hayes noticed me first. Mid-30s, tall, lean, sharp jawline, always dressed just slightly too polished, like he needed people to see him as important. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It never did. He was the team lead, and within 5 minutes I knew exactly what kind of leader he was. "You're the intern?" he asked, barely glancing at my name badge. "Yes." He nodded toward the hallway. "Coffee machine's broken again. Figure it out." No introduction, no onboarding, just instructions. I nodded. Of course. That became my role. Not analyst, not trainee, not even assistant, just invisible support. I made coffee, printed documents, scheduled meetings, fixed small problems no one wanted to deal with. And I watched, because that was the real reason I was there. 2 days later, I met Lily Chen, late 20s, petite, soft voice, always slightly tense, like she was trying not to draw attention. But her eyes, sharp, observant. She leaned closer to me one afternoon. "You don't have to do everything he says," she whispered. I glanced at her. "I know." She hesitated. "Then why are you?" I smiled. "Because I'm learning." She didn't understand. Not yet. By the end of the week, patterns started forming. Daniel interrupted people constantly, took credit casually, dismissed ideas without listening, and no one challenged him. Not because they agreed, because they were used to it. That's how culture breaks. Not loudly, quietly, repeatedly. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing everything. Emails, meeting notes, behavior. I wasn't looking for mistakes. I was mapping the system. Because my father, Charles Carter, 58, chairman of the entire group, had told me one thing before I started. If something feels wrong, don't fix it immediately. Understand it first. He suspected something. He just didn't know what. But I was starting to see it. Back at the office, HR finally called me in. Sandra Miller, mid-50s, polished, controlled. The kind of woman who spoke carefully to avoid responsibility. She looked at my file longer than necessary. "You have an impressive background," she said. I shrugged slightly. "I try." She nodded, but her expression didn't change. She knew something didn't add up, but she didn't push. No one ever does. By Friday, I had my place. Not in the team, not in the system, but around it. Ignored, overlooked, underestimated. Exactly where I needed to be. Because people don't hide who they are when they think you don't matter. And Daniel? He had already shown me everything. Daniel didn't ignore me anymore. That was the first change. And somehow, it was worse. It started on Monday morning. I had just sat down when his voice cut across the room. "Emma." Sharp, direct, not loud, but enough to make people look. I turned. He didn't look at me right away. He was flipping through a report, pretending to be busy. Then, "Why is the client brief still not printed?" I blinked. "I didn't receive," he cut me off. "Then check your email more carefully." I hadn't received anything. I checked anyway. Nothing. But that wasn't the point. From that moment on, he started assigning me tasks. Not work. Tasks. Coffee orders, meeting room setups, last-minute print jobs that somehow always became my responsibility. And every time, it was public. "Emma, did you forget again? Emma, this isn't complicated. Emma, we need people who can keep up." He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The tone was enough. People heard it. People saw it. And no one said anything. Except Lily. One afternoon, she approached me while everyone else was in a meeting. "You know he's doing this on purpose, right?" she said quietly. I looked at her. "I know." She frowned. "Then why don't you say something?" I thought about that for a second. Then I asked, "Would it change anything?" She didn't answer. That was my answer. Later that week, I was asked to sit in on a project discussion. Not to contribute, just to observe. The room was filled with senior staff. That's where I met Ryan Blake. Early 40s, broad build, slightly greying hair, sleeves always rolled up like he was trying to prove he still worked harder than everyone else. He had the confidence of experience, but also the blind spots that came with it. He nodded at me politely, didn't think much of it. The discussion started, ideas moving fast, problems being raised, solutions thrown around. And then, a gap. A clear one. A flaw in the workflow, obvious once you saw it. I hesitated for a second, then spoke. "Shouldn't we account for the delay between approval and execution?" Silence. Ryan looked at me, interested. Daniel didn't. "That's already been considered," he said immediately, dismissive, final. It hadn't been. I could see it in the numbers, in the timing, in the structure. But I didn't push. I nodded. "Got it." The meeting moved on, but something had shifted. Ryan glanced at me once more, not dismissive this time, curious. After the meeting, Daniel pulled me aside, his expression calm. Too calm. "You don't speak in those meetings," he said. I met his eyes. "Understood." He stepped closer. "You're here to learn, not to interrupt people who actually know what they're doing." I didn't respond, because I had already learned what I needed. This wasn't about performance. This was about control. That night, I did something different. I didn't just review notes. I started documenting patterns. Every interruption, every dismissal, every moment someone's idea was taken or ignored. Not emotionally, not personally, structurally. Because behavior like Daniel's doesn't stay isolated. It spreads. And systems built on that kind of behavior always break. I just needed to know when. By the second week, I stopped reacting entirely. Not just on the outside, inside too. Daniel's voice became background noise, criticism, orders, small corrections delivered like authority. I didn't resist them. I catalogued them. Every morning, I arrived before most of the team, 7:15 a.m. The office was quiet then, no pressure, no performance, no audience. That's when systems reveal themselves. I opened project dashboards, accessed shared folders, reviewed timelines no one else seemed to question. And patterns started forming. Delays hidden under adjusted expectations. Tasks reassigned without accountability. Approvals pushed through without proper review. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic. Just enough small gaps to create a larger problem. Daniel didn't see it, or maybe he did and chose not to. Either way, it didn't matter, because no one was checking him. Midweek, I crossed paths with someone new. Oliver Grant, late 30s, medium height, slightly unshaven, dark circles under his eyes like sleep had become optional. He wore wrinkled shirts and moved quickly, like his thoughts were always ahead of his actions. IT department. He barely acknowledged me at first, just nodded once, distracted. Later that day, I found him in the server room, half-open door, dim lights, screens glowing. "You shouldn't be here," he said without looking up. "I know," I replied. That got his attention. He turned, studied me for a second. "Intern?" he asked. "Yes." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Don't touch anything," he said. "Half this system's already fragile enough." I leaned slightly against the doorframe. "What do you mean?" He let out a short breath. "Shortcuts," he said. "Too many of them." He gestured towards the monitors. "Things get patched instead of fixed. Temporary solutions become permanent." I nodded slowly. "That sounds risky." He laughed quietly. "It is. But no one wants to slow things down to fix it properly." Of course they didn't. Speed looked better. Stability didn't get noticed until it failed. Back at my desk, I added another layer to my notes. Not just behavior, not just decisions. Infrastructure. Because leadership problems don't stay at the top. They leak into processes, into systems, into everything. By Friday, the project Daniel had dismissed earlier came back, revised, expanded, and still flawed. I watched him present it again, confident, controlled, unquestioned. No one interrupted, no one challenged, even when the numbers didn't align, even when the timeline made no sense. I glanced around the room. People noticed. I could see it, in the hesitation, in the quick looks exchanged. But no one spoke. That's when it became clear. This wasn't just about Daniel. This was about a system where speaking up had consequences, and silence didn't. That night, I sat in my apartment, reviewing everything again. My father's voice echoed in my head. "You don't fix a system by reacting to it," he once told me. "You fix it by understanding why it allows the problem to exist." I closed my laptop. I wasn't here to prove Daniel wrong. I was here to understand how someone like him could operate without resistance. And now, I was starting to see it. By the third week, I stopped waiting for permission to think. I didn't speak often, but when I did, it was because I was sure. The problem had been sitting there for days, quiet, hidden, but obvious once you looked closely enough. The project Daniel was leading had a structural flaw, not in the concept, in the timing. The execution phase overlapped with a dependency that hadn't been secured yet, which meant delay, or worse, failure. I double-checked everything, data, timeline, dependencies. Then I waited. The next team meeting came on Thursday afternoon. Same room, same setup, same dynamic. Daniel stood at the front, presenting updates like everything was under control, confident, unchallenged. When he paused for feedback, I spoke. "Shouldn't we separate the approval phase from execution?" The room shifted slightly. Not much, but enough. Daniel turned toward me slowly, expression neutral. Too neutral. "That's already been considered," he said. It hadn't. I kept my tone calm. "I don't see it reflected in the current timeline." A few glances around the table, quick, Subtle. People were thinking. Daniel didn't like that. "We're not restructuring the entire plan based on an intern's perspective," he said, sharper this time. Silence. And just like that, the conversation moved on. No discussion, no evaluation, just dismissal. I nodded once, didn't push, because I had what I needed. That night, I rewrote the entire segment. Clean, logical, precise. Not to prove a point, but to see what would happen next. 2 days later, the executive preview meeting was scheduled. Higher stakes. Senior leadership present. I wasn't invited. Of course not. But I didn't need to be, because I had already seen the draft presentation. And when Daniel started presenting, I knew immediately. He used it. The exact structure, the corrected timeline, the dependency separation, word for word, even the phrasing. I sat in the back corner of the room, same place I was always told to stay, invisible, watching, and this time, listening carefully. That adjustment improved efficiency by 18%, Daniel said smoothly. It had, because it worked, because it was right, and because it wasn't his. The room responded immediately. Nods, approval, recognition. At the head of the table, Margaret Collins spoke. Early 50s, tall, composed, sharp posture, silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly. Chief Operations Officer, known for precision and results, not sentiment. "Good work," she said. Simple, but in that room, it meant everything. Daniel smiled, slightly, controlled. I looked around. Most people accepted it, but not all. Ryan glanced at the slide again, longer than necessary. And Lily, she didn't look at the screen at all. She looked at me, just for a second, then looked away. She knew, but she stayed silent, just like everyone else. After the meeting, no one said anything. No confrontation, no correction. The system absorbed it, just like it always did. Back at my desk, I opened my notes. Not surprised, just confirming. Because this wasn't about one idea. It was about a pattern. And patterns don't change on their own. They build, until something forces them to break. I closed the file. For the first time, I wasn't just observing anymore. I was preparing. By the end of the month, the project was no longer at risk. It was a success. The numbers came in first. Higher efficiency, lower delay, clean execution. Exactly what the revised structure was supposed to deliver. No one questioned it. No one needed to. Success explains itself. Daniel stood at the center of it. Confident, controlled, recognized. He moved differently now. Walked slower, spoke with more certainty, like someone who believed the outcome had validated everything he'd done. "Good work, team," he said one morning, standing near the whiteboard. But when he said team, everyone knew what he meant. Himself. The project was scheduled for a formal presentation to the board, not just department heads this time, executive level. That's when things changed. Because once something reaches that level, it stops being internal. It becomes visible. That afternoon, I noticed a new name on the internal calendar. Executive Review. Attendance confirmed. Charles Carter. My father. He didn't attend most operational reviews, only the ones that mattered. I stared at the screen for a moment longer than necessary. So he had seen it. Or at least, something about it. At the same time, something else was happening, quietly. HR activity increased. I saw it in the system logs, access requests, internal reviews, flagged communications. Then I met Sophia Alvarez, late 30s, HR compliance officer. Medium height, sharp posture, dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Calm voice, but her eyes moved constantly, always analysing, always measuring. She stopped by my desk late in the afternoon. "You're Emma, right?" I nodded. She held a tablet in her hand. "There's been an anonymous report filed regarding management behaviour in your department." I didn't react. "Do you have anything you'd like to add?" she asked. Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was careful, measured. I shook my head. "No." She studied me for a second, like she expected something else. Then she nodded. "All right," and walked away. I didn't stop her, because timing matters. That evening, Lily stayed late, later than usual. I saw her sitting at her desk, staring at her screen without typing. I walked past her slowly. She didn't look up at first. Then, "Emma," she said quietly. I turned. Her voice was different this time, less controlled. "I should have said something," she added. I didn't respond immediately, because I wanted to understand what she meant. "In the meeting," she said, "about your idea." There it was. She knew. "I saw what happened," she continued. "Everyone did. We just—" She stopped. I waited. "Did nothing." I nodded slightly. "I know." She looked at me, confused. "You're not angry?" she asked. I met her eyes. "Would it change anything?" She hesitated, then slowly shook her head. "Exactly." The next morning, the office felt different. Not outwardly, but underneath. Pressure, expectation, confidence building around something no one fully understood. The presentation deck was finalized, every slide polished, every number aligned, every word intentional, and every idea carefully attributed, just not to the right person. I sat at my desk, reviewing the final version one last time, not to correct it, just to confirm, because once something is celebrated, it becomes harder to question. And that's when the real problems begin. The first crack didn't look like a crack. It looked like a delay, a minor one. 6 hours behind schedule. Easily explained, easily ignored. But I had seen this pattern before. Small inconsistencies, stacked quietly, until they weren't small anymore. By midweek, the delays started repeating. Not identical, but connected. Tasks completed, but not verified. Approvals given, but not documented. Execution moving forward, without confirmation. I watched it unfold from my desk. Same place, same silence. Daniel didn't notice at first. Or maybe he did, and chose to control the narrative. "Just a timing issue," he said in the morning briefing. "We're adjusting." Everyone nodded, because that's what you do when confidence sounds convincing. But by Thursday, even he couldn't ignore it. The numbers stopped aligning. That's when I saw it, the moment his tone changed. Slight hesitation, slight pause before answering questions. That was new. That was real. In the afternoon, I ran into Oliver again. Same server room, same dim lights, but this time, he looked more tired. "You're seeing it too, right?" he said without looking up. I didn't ask what he meant. "Logs don't match execution," he continued. "Someone's been overriding checkpoints." That got my attention. "Who?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not sure yet, but it's not random." He turned the monitor slightly toward me. Lines of data, timestamps, overrides, patterns. "Things are being pushed through manually," he said, "without proper validation." "Shortcuts, again." I nodded slowly. "Can you trace it?" I asked. He hesitated. "I can," he said, "but I'm not sure anyone wants that answer." That made sense, because answers change things. Back in the main office, tension had started to settle in. Subtle, but present. People checked their work twice, spoke less, looked at Daniel more carefully. That's when I noticed someone new in the room. Victor Lang, early 50s, tall, broad shoulders, calm posture, grey suit without a wrinkle. His presence didn't demand attention, but it held it anyway. Senior Operations Director. He didn't interrupt meetings, didn't ask unnecessary questions. He just watched. And when someone like that watches, it means something is already wrong. During the afternoon review, Daniel presented updates again. More controlled now, more careful, but not enough. Victor leaned forward slightly. "Walk me through the verification process," he said. Daniel didn't answer immediately. That was the second crack. "It's integrated into the workflow," Daniel replied. Victor nodded. "Then show me." Silence. Brief, but heavy. Daniel moved to the next slide. Avoidance. Victor didn't push, not then, but he didn't look convinced either. Across the table, Lily sat still. Too still. Her hands were folded tightly, eyes fixed on the screen, but not focused. She knew something. The question was whether she would say it. That night, I reviewed everything again. Not just behavior, not just data, but pressure. Where it started, where it built, where it would break. Because systems don't collapse randomly, they collapse where they're weakest. And Ridgeway was getting close. The boardroom felt different that morning. Quieter, heavier. This wasn't a team meeting. This was accountability. The table was longer than usual. Executives on both sides, legal, operations, finance, and at the head, my father. Charles Carter, 58, tall, composed, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. Today, he wasn't speaking. He was watching. Daniel stood at the front, perfect suit, perfect posture, controlled expression. But I could see it, the tension in his jaw, the slight delay before he advanced each slide. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how much. "Let's begin," Victor said calmly. Daniel nodded, started presenting. The slides were flawless. Clean visuals, confident numbers, structured narrative. Everything looked right. That was the problem, because I knew where the gaps were. He moved through the timeline, the revised workflow, the efficiency gains. My work, presented as his. No hesitation, no acknowledgement, just ownership. Halfway through, Victor raised his hand. "Walk us through the validation checkpoints," he said. The room stilled. Daniel paused. "Those are integrated into the system," he replied. Victor didn't move. "Show me." A longer silence this time. Daniel clicked to the next slide. Avoidance again. That's when I stood up. Slowly, calmly, every head turned. "Actually," I said, "they're not integrated." Daniel froze. "What?" he snapped. I stepped forward slightly. "The validation process was removed from the original structure," I continued. "That's why execution started overlapping with unverified approvals." Murmurs around the table. Victor leaned back, interested. Daniel shook his head. "That's not accurate." I met his eyes. "It is." I turned toward the screen. "Slide 14, I said. He hesitated, then clicked. The diagram appeared. Clean, simple, incomplete. I pointed. "This dependency was never secured," I said. "That's why the system required manual overrides." Silence. Heavy now. Victor looked at Daniel. Is that correct? Daniel didn't answer immediately. That was enough. I reached into my folder, pulled out a printed document. Not dramatic, not loud, just precise. The original correction was documented here, I said, before it was removed. I placed it on the table. Victor picked it up, read, then passed it down. One by one, eyes scanning, expressions changing. Across the room, Lily's hands were shaking. She looked at me, then at Daniel, then she stood. She's right, Lily said softly. But in that silence, it echoed. I saw it, she continued. The original version. It was hers. That was it. The room shifted completely. Daniel stepped back. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. We adjusted the model as a team. No, Victor interrupted, calm, final. You didn't. Daniel's voice tightened. You're going to take an intern's word over mine? That's when I turned toward the head of the table and spoke the only sentence that mattered. Dad, I think we need to talk about leadership in this department. The room went still, completely still. Daniel blinked. What? He said. I didn't look at him. I looked at my father, and for the first time, he spoke. I was waiting for this, Charles said quietly. Not surprised, not shocked, just certain. Daniel's composure broke. You knew? He asked. Charles didn't answer, because he didn't need to. The truth was already in the room, and now everyone could see it. Silence didn't break immediately. It settled, heavy, final. Daniel looked around the room like he was waiting for someone to step in, to correct it, to reverse it. No one did. Victor was the first to move. He closed the folder in front of him, slow and deliberate. Daniel Hayes, he said calmly. Step outside. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Daniel didn't argue. Not at first. Then he looked at me. You planned this, he said, voice tight. I held his gaze. No, I replied. You built it. That was the last thing he heard in that room. 2 security staff appeared at the door minutes later. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet exit. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the room felt different, not lighter, clearer. My father stood up, slowly. He looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes. This company was built on accountability, he said. Not loud, but absolute. And somewhere along the way, we stopped enforcing it. No one interrupted, because everyone knew. He turned toward me. This, he continued, is Emma Carter. A pause. My daughter. The words didn't echo. They landed and stayed. Reactions were immediate but controlled. Shock, realization, a shift in posture across the table. But no one questioned it, because the truth had already proven itself. Victor nodded once. That explains the clarity, he said. I didn't respond, because this wasn't about identity. It was about outcome. The meeting didn't end. It changed direction. Full review, Victor said. Department structure, reporting lines, compliance checkpoints. My father looked at me again. Lead it. Simple, direct, no ceremony, just responsibility. I nodded. Understood. The next few days moved fast, faster than anything before. Decisions made, processes paused, systems opened. Not to rebuild immediately, but to understand what needed to be removed first. Lily was one of the first people I called in. She sat across from me, hands still slightly tense, but steadier now. "I don't want a title," she said quietly. "I just want things to be right." I studied her for a moment. "You spoke when it mattered," I said. She looked down. "That's enough." She stayed. Ryan stayed too. Not because he was perfect, but because he had started asking questions before anyone else did. That mattered. Oliver stayed, because systems don't fix themselves, and people who understand them are rare. Others didn't. Some left voluntarily. Some didn't get the choice. By the end of the week, the structure was different. Cleaner. Clear reporting lines, verified checkpoints, no silent overrides. And one rule: nothing moves forward without accountability. I said it in the first team meeting I led. No slides, no presentation. Just a room full of people who had seen what happens when systems fail. And for the first time, no one looked away. If you were me, would you have spoken up sooner? Or stayed silent and let everything fall apart on its own? Was Daniel just a bad leader? Or was the system protecting him the whole time? And here's the real question. When you see something wrong at work, do you risk everything to say it, or protect yourself and stay quiet? If you were in that room, what would you choose? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your side. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's always another story waiting.